You know, there are certain stories that we just kind of file away, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the nice category of our brains. You probably heard them 1,000 times, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know, on a flannel graph in Sunday school.
Oh, the flannel graph,
Yeah,
definitely. Or in a wedding sermon.
exactly. And the story of Ruth almost always gets pitched as this ultimate pastoral romance. You know the vibe I'm talking about.
I do. It's heartwarming. But if you stop there, if you just leave it as a Hallmark movie,
Yeah,
you are missing the actual engine of the story. You're missing the grit.
that's it. That is what we are digging into today. We're looking at a source called Naomi, the Strategic Architect of Redemption.
And the title alone sort of gives away the game.
It really does. This isn't just about Ruth's loyalty. It's about Naomi's brain.
It completely challenges the traditional reading. We often see Naomi as this tragic, passive figure who just happens to be there while Ruth does all the heavy lifting.
Right.
But this analysis argues that Naomi is the theological anchor. She's the strategist. And ultimately, she's the one the story is actually about.
Okay, so to get this, we have to completely reset the scene because the source is really clear. This was not a fairy tale setting.
Far from it. The text opens with, "In the days when the judges ruled."
Which, to my ear, that just sounds like once upon a time.
Right, but if you were an ancient Hebrew reader, that phrase would send a shiver down your spine.
Okay, why? What does that actually mean?
It means anarchy. Total societal collapse. There was no king, no centralized government, and religious life had fallen apart. The recurring line in the book of Judges is, everyone did what was right in their own eyes.
So warlords, raiding parties, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It was a time of complete political and spiritual disintegration. We're not talking about a peaceful countryside. We're talking about a post-apocalyptic survival situation.
A dark backdrop.
A very dark backdrop.
And in the middle of all this chaos, there's a famine in Bethlehem,
Real.
which the source points out is incredibly ironic.
It is. Bethlehem literally translates to house of bread.
So the house of bread has no bread.
Exactly. And the source frames this not just as like a random weather event, but as a divine indictment. In the theology of the time, a famine was often seen as a stop sign from God, a judgment on the land's spiritual state.
And this leads to the first major controversy in this deep dive. Naomi's husband, Elimelech, decides to pack up the family and move.
Yeah.
But he doesn't just go to the next town over. He moves the family to Moab. So unpack this for us. Why is Moab such a big deal?
This is crucial context we usually miss. Moab wasn't just a neutral neighbor. The Moabites were the descendants of Lot's incestuous union with his daughter.
Yikes. Okay, so there's some baggage there.
A lot of baggage. Historically, they were enemies of Israel. They are the ones who hired the sorcerer Balaam to curse Israel in the wilderness. They were constantly at war.
So this is not like moving from New York to New Jersey to find a better job.
No, this is moving to enemy territory. The source calls this a failure of faith.
A failure of faith.
Elimelech was trading covenant endurance, staying where God planted them, even in hard times, for immediate economic relief in a pagan land. He walked away from the promises of God to find bread among the enemies of God.
And the tragedy is, while he was looking for survival, the family found death.
It's brutal. The source calls it a decade of devastating loss. Naomi loses her husband. Then she loses both of her sons.
And we have to stop and understand what that meant for a woman back then.
Right. It's not just grief. It's structural.
It's total erasure.
Absolutely. In that patriarchal structure, a woman's identity, her economic security, it was all wrapped up in her male relatives. To be a childless widow in a foreign land, I mean, she had no social safety net. She was destitute. Socially dead.
Which brings us to her return. She hears there's bread back in Bethlehem, so she drags herself home. She walks into town, and the women are shocked. They ask, "Is this Naomi?"
And her response is just legendary. She says, "Don't call me Naomi."
Oh, Mommy Mara.
Which means bitter.
Now, I have to push back on this a little bit, because I was always taught that this was, a bad attitude, like she's being ungrateful or whiny. But the source seems to be defending her here.
It does more than defend her. It holds her up as a model. The source argues that this Mara declaration isn't a sin, it's spiritual honesty.
Spiritual honesty.
Yeah.
But she's blaming God for ruining her life.
And that's exactly the point. Think about the alternative in our modern culture, and honestly, in a lot of church culture. What do we do when things fall apart?
We say God has a plan, or I'm blessed. We put on a happy face.
We fake it. The source calls this spiritual bypassing. We pretend everything is fine because we think God can't handle our anger or our pain. Naomi refuses to do that. She looks at the wreckage of her life and says, "The Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me."
So by blaming God, she's actually acknowledging him.
Precisely. She isn't an atheist. She knows God is sovereign. She knows that he's the one in charge. The source says her emptiness creates the vacuum that God intends to fill. And you can't be filled if you pretend you aren't empty.
That's a powerful reframing. So she's back, she's bitter, she's empty. But then something shifts. The source calls this the turning point, and it all revolves around this Hebrew word, hesed.
As said, yeah. That's one of those rich, heavy theological words that's so hard to translate with just one English word.
Which usually loving kindness.
It is, but it's more than that. It really means loyal love. It's a covenant loyalty that goes way beyond legal obligation. It's the love that sticks around when it doesn't have to.
And we usually talk about Ruth showing hes to Naomi by sticking with her.
Yeah.
But the source says Naomi is the one who interprets this.
Right, so Naomi's in this fog of grief. But then Ruth comes home with a huge amount of barley from Boaz's field. And that's the moment Naomi wakes up. She realizes this wasn't just luck.
Ah,
She identifies Boaz not just as some nice guy who gave out grain, but as a goel.
a goel, that's the kinsman redeemer.
Exactly, a relative who has the legal right and responsibility to restore their family's line and land. And this is where Naomi transitions from a passive victim to an active strategist. She sees God's his verdict working through a human agent.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Because Naomi comes up with a plan. And let's be honest, the plan in Ruth chapter 3 is, well, it's controversial.
The threshing floor scene, yes.
Yep.
It's historically the most debated part of the book.
The source calls it godly shrewdness.
I like that. Naomi tells Ruth to wash, anoint herself, put on her best garment, and go to the threshing floor where Boaz is sleeping.
Okay, let's break that down, because the source says the washing and anointing, that wasn't just about hygiene.
No, it was ritualistic. Think about King David in 2 Samuel. When he stops mourning the death of his child, what does he do? He washes and changes his clothes.
So Naomi is telling Ruth to officially end her mourning period.
She's rebranding her. She's changing Ruth's identity from foreign beggar to eligible bride.
It's a huge shift. She's telling her to dress for the job she wants, essentially.
In a way, yes. But then comes the instruction to uncover his feet. Now, the source clarifies this because it sounds very strange, even scandalous to us.
It does.
But in that culture, it was a formal request for protection and marriage. It wasn't a request for an illicit act, though. The risk was certainly there.
That's the thing. It was so risky. Sending her to a sleeping man in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
That could have gone wrong in so many ways.
Incredibly risky. But Naomi was banking on Boaz's character. She knew he was an Ishgibber Chael, a man of noble character. She knew he wouldn't exploit Ruth.
Okay, there's this one detail the source highlights that I absolutely loved. It's about the wings. Can you connect the dots on that?
Oh, this is fascinating. This is the literary aha moment of the entire book. You have to go back to when Boaz and Ruth first met in the field. Do you remember what Boaz prayed over her?
Something about God rewarding her for leaving her home.
Close. He prays, "May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge."
Okay, God's wings. Got it.
Exactly. The Hebrew word for wing is kanaf. Now fast forward to the threshing floor. Ruth doesn't just ask for a blanket. She uses that same exact word. She says to Boaz, "Spread your kanaf, your wing, over me."
Wait, she's quoting his own prayer back to him.
She is, and this is all Naomi's coaching. She's effectively saying, "Boaz, you prayed that God would cover me with his wings. Well, guess what? You are the answer to your own prayer. You are the wings."
Whoa, that is bold.
It's brilliant. Naomi teaches Ruth that Boaz is the instrument of God's protection. She's forcing him to connect his theology with his actions. It's not just waiting for God to move. It's recognizing how God moves through people.
That's next level strategy. And that leads us into the sociological side of this deep dive.
Right.
Because the source argues that what Naomi is doing here is the prototype for mentorship, specifically the Titus 2 model.
Right. And for listeners who might not know the reference, Titus 2 is a passage in the New Testament where the older women are instructed to teach and train the younger women.
But the source gets pretty critical of the modern landscape here. It talks about something it calls the bitter sisterhood.
Yes, this is a very sharp critique. The source argues that in many modern church contexts, there's a generation of older women who have essentially checked out.
What do you mean checked out?
They've raised their kids, they've done their time, and they kind of leave the younger women to navigate faith and marriage and life all on their own. And on the flip side of that, the source defines a term it calls mama trauma.
Mama trauma. That sounds heavy.
It is. It refers to younger women coming into the faith, often from broken homes, maybe with difficult relationships with their own mothers. They are craving a spiritual mother, and Naomi, but they often find judgment or just disengagement instead.
And the source's point is that without Naomi, Ruth just stays a gleaner. She stays a laborer. Naomi's the one who teaches her how to become the lady of the house.
Exactly. Ruth has the character, but she doesn't know the cultural map. Naomi has the map.
And the source gets into why this mentorship gap exists. And this is where it gets a little controversial. It brings up modern feminism.
It does. And again, just to be clear, this is the source's perspective we're reporting on.
Right.
The argument is that by devaluing domesticity, society has unintentionally made some older women embarrassed to teach home skills or what you might call womanly arts, seeing them as oppressive or outdated.
I can see that. And so if you spent your life building a home, you might feel like that's not something the younger, career-focused generation wants to hear about.
Precisely. And the second point it makes is about the professionalizing of ministry, leaving everything to the paid pastors and staff. Women can feel absolved of that duty to mentor personally. They think, well, that's the pastor's job.
So you have younger women craving guidance and older women feeling like they have nothing valuable to share or that it's not their place. It's a disconnect.
A huge disconnect. And the source argues that Naomi breaks this cycle. She uses her own bitterness, her own experience to guide Ruth. She doesn't wait until she's healed and happy to start leading.
Let's pivot to the men for a second. Because Naomi's whole strategy depends entirely on Boaz being a specific kind of guy.
The Ishgiver Chael, the man of valor.
Now, the source makes a comparison here that totally threw me. I never realized these two guys were basically contemporaries. The source compares Boaz to Samson.
Samson the strong man.
Yes. In my head, Samson is this ancient action hero, and Boaz is this quiet farmer from a different era. But the source says they're living at roughly the same time.
Roughly the same time period, yes. Both operating in the time of the judges.
Yeah.
And the contrast is intentional. They are the two primary options for masculinity in that era.
So if you're swiping left or right in ancient Israel, these are your two profiles.
Exactly. On one hand, you have Samson. He's all He-Man energy. He's strong, he's charismatic, but he is driven entirely by impulse. His famous line is, "I have seen her, get her for me."
He's the bad boy.
He's the destroyer. He breaks covenants, he isolates himself, he fights alone, and he leaves a trail of destruction. Then you look at Boaz.
And Boaz is what? The boring guy?
He's the Hesed guy. He's driven by law and community. When he needs to make a decision about Ruth, he doesn't just take her. He goes to the city gate.
The city gate transaction. I thought the source's contrast with modern dating here was really insightful.
It's a stark contrast. Modern dating is so often private, ambiguous, hanging out, keeping your options open, the situationship.
Let's just see where this goes.
Right. But the city gate model is public. Boaz calls 10 elders as witnesses. It's legal, it's transparent, everybody knows what's happening, and the text says he will not rest until the matter is settled.
Immediate action, no ambiguity.
None. And the source suggests that a lot of modern advice points women towards Samson traits. Charisma, flashiness, excitement, rather than Boaz traits like integrity, public accountability, and a willingness to do things the right way, even if it's slower. Naomi knew the difference.
She steered Ruth toward the man who would build up the house, not tear it down.
Ex-
So the plan works. Boaz steps up, he redeems the land, marries Ruth. But the source points out something about the ending of the book that I think most people miss. We focus on the wedding, but the text focuses on the baby.
And specifically, it shifts the focus right back to Naomi.
Ruth gives birth to a son, Obed. But what do the women of the town say?
They say, a son has been born to Naomi.
A son has been born to Naomi. That gives me chills. Why is it phrased that way?
It's the resolution of the entire narrative arc. Remember, she went out full and came back empty. She came back Mara bitter. Now she is filled again.
Wow.
And the source notes, she isn't filled by getting her dead husband or sons back. That loss is real and permanent. She's filled by redeeming the living.
She becomes the nurse to the baby.
Yes, she becomes the nourisher. And this is the ultimate so what of this whole deep dive. Because who is this baby?
Obed.
And Obed becomes the father of Jesse.
Who becomes the father of David.
King David, the greatest king of Israel. And eventually, that line leads to Jesus.
So let's trace this back. Without Naomi's strategy, without the washing, the threshing floor, the risk, the mentorship, that whole line is broken.
That's the argument. The source calls Naomi the indispensable bridge. She bridges the gap between the chaos of the judges and the coming kingship of David. She took the bitterness of her life, the Mara, and through strategic faith, she turned it into a legacy that literally changed the world.
That is a massive shift in perspective. She's not a side character. She's the architect.
She is. And the source leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. It argues that the most pressing need in the modern family and the modern church isn't just more enthusiastic young people, it's the restoration of this Naomi archetype.
We need more Naomis.
We do. We need wise, strategic, spiritual mothers who are willing to take their pain, their Mara, and use it to build a legacy for someone else. We need women who know the map and are willing to show the way.
That's a lot to chew on. From Call Me Bitterness to the Grandmother of Kings. It really redefines what it means to be successful in the second half of life.
It's the very definition of redemption. It's taking the worst things that happen to you and letting God weave them into a plan that blesses generations you will never even see.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the strategic mind of Naomi. It certainly changes how I'm going to read the Book of Ruth next time. It's not just a romance, it's a blueprint.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.